Welcome to the Cockney Guide to Enlightenment podcast. My name's Stephen Rosen, and in this podcast we go beneath the surface of people's lives to find out what makes them tick. My own life I wrote about in this book, Lost in the Babylon. It's through childhood adversity, organised crime and a successful life as a businessman in the city. When I talk to people, we go beneath the surface of where they got to in their lives and we find out what really makes them tick. So if you want to follow me, connect to me with social media at Cockney Profit. And if you enjoy this podcast, please like it, subscribe or follow us and enjoy the episode. Welcome to the Cockney Guide to Enlightenment podcast with me, Stephen Rosen, and my guest today is Christopher Gladwell. Hey, Chris.
Good to see you.
Good to see you. And just to give the audience a little bit of background, you was one of my first guests on the podcast.
That's right. Yeah.
And it was a wild conversation.
It was good, wasn't it?
It was brilliant. And but there was some sort of technical difficulty with it.
Yeah.
And it was just, the audio wasn't right to put out. So we decided to reconvene at a later date. And
I thought at the time that probably it was too wild to put out anyway. So it's probably a good job.
It might have been, It was a real roller coaster, that podcast, but it was great because, what I loved about that, and obviously I know you, I kind of introduce you in a minute, but what I loved about that was, I was seeing some background stuff and just a kind of vision of you that I never kind of got to see before. So I think that was really good and rich about it, and some of your where you come from, all that kind of stuff. Maybe we'll obviously there's no script, but maybe we'll come across some of that again anyway. But so Christopher's a master really of kind of. Master teacher, I'd say, of breathwork, of yoga, of just embodiment. Kind of, how else would you describe yourself, Christopher?
I teach bio skills. Meta skills, if you like, which come from the kind of yogic Asian domain primarily, mixed up with biology and science, but they're about optimizing us, optimizing human beings, finding a way to be the very best that we can be, and using skills to enable that, and teaching people to enable that for themselves. Yeah, that's how I see it. Yeah, no, it's a difficult one to put into a phrase that everyone understands, isn't it? So there's so many different components to that, and one of the things that I really found fascinating about your teachings, because you come from a biology background, don't you? Human biology. Evolutionary biology. Yeah. And you've written numerous books. I know you've got several books. 16 books out there. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, that's impressive.
Yeah.
So you're prolific at your energy that you're putting out into the world, and what I really love about your teachings is like there's no separation. It's like we are one component and one with everything. I think is that have I understood that right?
I think it's fair to say that. I mean, I think the essence of the teaching is the many as the one and the one as the many. So it's not just a homogeneous soup, like a blended soup of nothingness. It's understanding uniqueness and individuality and difference in subjective experience, but all that as the unified field, if you like, of reality or totality. I was talking to my friend Marcus this morning. We were talking about anybody, because the idea of a separate self thing, the I, the feeling of the sense of I and the feeling of me and the territory of mine, is a biological delusion, and the whole of the modern world exaggerates that delusion to the maximum. So it's all about me and having a shiny me that can face into Instagram or the world, And so it's a lot of what people are doing is trying to polish the edges of the me thing to make it look better on social media or, with their friends or whatever. And that itself is the problem. That's the problem, because it doesn't even exist.
That sounds like like polishing the surface of the projection of the persona, or
something like that.
Of what that is. But I mean, on the deeper level, and I'm going to go straight into this because you've
Go
opened
for it.
up.
Go for it.
You know, I had an experience that, and it wasn't anything to do with plant medicine or anything like that. I was just in a relaxation place of pure relaxation. I'd had some reflexology, and I was just really super relaxed and super comfortable. And I was laying down, and then because I've got awareness about certainly my breath, you know, from working with you and doing some, you know, just daily breath practice and stuff like that. So I was aware of the breath going in, and I could feel it going in, and I could trace it down, and I could feel it inside myself. I was aware of my body, you know, I'm fully conscious. And then I kind of felt this, like there was like the breath was between my body and something else. And then this something else just kind of, you know, it just embodied really. It was, I can't really say what it was, an energy, a soul. I took it to be a soul, but I've no idea what a soul is really, you know. But I had this real powerful experience of recognising a part of me that I kind of maybe thought was there, but hadn't really ever felt an experience on that kind of level. So, and I'm not saying that's separate, but, you know, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of like still trying to figure this stuff out. I mean, I know I had the experience. I know it was profound, you know, it was just beautiful. You know, there was tears coming out of my eyes. I was just experiencing this, just thinking, wow, man, how did I get to this place in life where I can actually experience this without any breath, without any like psychedelics or anything like that. Just my experience of being alive. And I don't know if that's what you're talking about, as that being part of the whole, or
There's a Japanese word called kensho. Kensho, which is, or you know, it's a moment of kind of depth insight into something, and an awakening experience of some kind, right? And those experiences actually often happen when you're just chilling out, because you're doing the work elsewhere. If you're doing your discipline practice, and we could talk about discipline, because I think discipline is really important, and discipline needs to be understood as well properly if we're going to do the work. But if you're doing your discipline practice and you're doing the stuff, you're doing the work, then it's most likely those kenshos don't happen when you're doing the discipline, but you're setting everything up ready for the kensho to happen. So it's when you're chilling out, when you're getting the reflexology, when you're down by the beach or somewhere else, just suddenly you go, oh, wow. And there's this kind of aha of recognition, which often is non-verbal, and it's often complicated to put it into words because it's
very complicated, yeah.
Because by its nature, you know, language by its nature cuts things up and puts them into small little pieces. So to define something like that would have to be kind of poetry or something like that, or a song, or a movement or a dance. Do you know what I mean? To even begin to describe it. So those kenshos are kind of quite profound, but that's kind of when they happen. I mean, that's a beautiful way to describe that, because I always stumble around trying to actually translate that into words that people would be able to resonate or even just, you know, understand. But so for me, you know, and you know, just to quantify that part that you was just saying that the other people do, I kind of live a lot of my life out there just projecting what I wanted to be, who I wanted to be. So, you know, this inner awareness just didn't exist for me. But anyway, it's not about me, it's about you. Again, I was talking to Marcus today. We were talking about, you know, the brain is a predicting machine. Mostly what it does is take in sensory information, and from the body as well. There's a lot of information going from the body. All of that information from the sense fields and from the body is filtered to the maximum, and it's filtered based on our past experience. Because the brain is busy predicting what is going to happen next based on what has happened. And that depends on the biological algorithms, it depends on the culture we've grown up in, all the cultural conditioning, the family stories, all that kind of stuff. But that brain is busy predicting the next thing. So it's like having blinkers on, like blinkers on a horse, where you can only see that little thing. Because that's what your brain is busy looking for. You know, I was mentioning a parable, as a Sufi parable that says, when a pickpocket sees a saint, what do they see? And the answer is pockets. They're just looking for pockets. That's all they're looking for. So we kind of see what we're looking for, And we're confirming that the whole time. So we're busy in this kind of tunnel of perspective that's getting tighter and tighter and tighter. And we call that reality.
Yeah.
You know, it's insanity.
It is, and it's, yeah, I mean, I like the way that you described that, because it really kind of, yeah, it's accessible, because, you know, what we do is we just filter out all of this other stuff, all of this other awareness and access to this, I think.
Yeah.
And it becomes, we become very focused.
Yeah.
Very focused on achieving, or, you know, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Whatever
I mean,
it
there's
is.
a miracle of life sitting here just behind me, caressing my shoulder here.
Yeah. Yes.
And if we actually looked into this and how this actually works and what this is doing, I mean, this is right now busy making oxygen that I'm breathing in, that's going to every single one of the 37 trillion cells of this body. So right now, these beingnesses here are in direct interrelationship. You know, it's interbeing. It's not, you know, you can't actually make a definition where that's using sunlight and breaking up water, and it's making this oxygen, which is going to all these cells, which is, you know, now talking. And when you really begin to think systemically and begin to see systemically how things are really joined up, and not this kind of like deluded separation story we run on, it's magical. It's unbelievably wondrous, you know.
And I mean, I meditate next to this plant most mornings, and sit down and do a bit of breath work next to it. And this new leaf, I don't know if the camera will pick that up, but I'm just fascinated by that. I'm just like in awe of it, you know. It's just like, but I feel, you know, sometimes even like, you know, when I close my eyes, I can feel kind of like a field between me and the plant. You know, I can kind of get that connection, which is that other stuff that you say that we kind of just shut out. Yeah. We shut out in the capacity of what we use in I suppose the level of consciousness that we can be in.
And, you know, I think the NHS statistics at the moment are suggesting, well, they're not suggesting, they're saying that 74%, I can't remember, 73 or 74% of the UK population are in a high state of stress and report overwhelm on a regular basis. And that means most everybody's running on a brain that's operating without the capacity to fully use the most evolved bits, because everybody's in this kind of cortisol-rich, adrenalized state, you know, trying to make sense of the world, trying to make enough money to pay the rent, you know, dealing with the complexities they've got to deal with. And the whole this country and lots of others are all running like this at the moment.
Yeah.
Now, what we've created in terms of human optimization is, again, insanity. It's not the way that's going to enable us to really evolve and grow well on this planet.
And I think that's you know, my kind of assessment of our species at the moment is that we're very self-destructive. We're fantastic species, but you know, we're self-destructive, and we're probably at a point where we do need to evolve in a not too far future into a way that's, you know, going to be a lot more encompassing of the whole of our species, you know, rather than just this separation that we've evolved into. Yeah,
one of the things I talk about is conscious evolution, because if you know, again, as an evolutionary biologist, if you understand the principles of evolution, basically, because an organism isn't separate from its environment; it's a function of its environment. It's not actually a separate thing in the environment. It's a response to and adapts to. So it's all about functional fit. So the thing which survives is not about the fittest, like some people think. It's not about Rambo survives and everybody else dies. It's not like that, or whoever muscular character you want to think of. It's not like that. It's about intelligence and adaptability. That's what survives, right? That's what survives. That's what thrives. And if human beings currently are being ignorant in relationship to their environment, which is what we're doing, it's exactly what we're doing, we will not survive. We'll not make the grade. So if we want to continue, if we want for our children's and our children's children's to continue to survive, we have to start paying attention to doing things differently. And there isn't really, you know, unless you're really seriously deluded about what's happening on the planet, then you're going to have to begin to pay attention to that. And right now, as I see it, I mean, it's curious to me, you know, like, you know, Just Stop Oil protesters got locked up for 5 years each for sitting on the M25. Now, I don't necessarily agree with their tactics, But the principles of what they're trying to work with, which is raise awareness about how fossil fuels are contributing, and the science is irrevocable on this. This is not, yes, sunspots play a part. Yes, there's some solar surges and this kind of thing. Yes, we've got that. And also, digging up carbon by the millions of tons that was put down into the earth in the Carboniferous era and burning it in a very short period of time is going to cause complications. It's a massive change in atmospheric content of carbon dioxide, and 98% of the science is in agreement with this, right? So it's not like, oh, there's lots of questions, because the questions are put there by oil companies. I'll probably get a fatwa put on me by the oil companies now. Do you know what I mean? If such goes out, but because the oil companies have been putting out misinformation since the 1970s about this, because it's all about money. And again, one of them, and if everything is about money, then this is a worthless experience of connection with this plant, because I can't make money out of this. Being blown away by the wonder of nature. If you look at GDP and how profit is measured, for example, if you look at GDP, you have a big smash on the motorway or a train crash, it's great for GDP because you've got fire services, police services, ambulances involved, you've got health insurance, you've got life insurance, you've got hospitals involved. It's great for GDP. It's not good for quality of life. If you have a big group of people who go down and sit and have a really nice time by the beach and go for a swim and have a little picnic, that's lousy for GDP, but it's great for quality of life. So we're measuring life in the world at the moment based on how much profit can be made out of everything, rather than what the quality of life or the experience of life or any of that stuff, which is not surprising that 73% of the population are then in overwhelm.
I mean, I completely agree with that definition of how we quantify ourselves, how we quantify ourselves, and it's always an external value that we put to ourselves, and and that I think is something that individuals can change, and by practices and by different ways of raising that consciousness and just opening those blinkers so further. And I've done it in my life, I kind of, I was very successful in a business, I've been lots of different places in life, but kind of, was in that scenario and just, I suppose, was unconscious in that scenario, to a certain extent. I was fairly unconscious. I was, trying to be self-aware and taking care of people and being, I wasn't one of those companies that just drained everything. I tried to look after the people in the business and all of that kind of stuff. But to a quite larger extent, I was unconscious of the deeper connection with me. And that, once again, I was quantifying myself by my value to my family, by my value to my employees, by my value to my wife, and all of these different scenarios, how I quantified my worth, really, and how I was, and it wasn't till I kind of got some disconnection from all of that I actually started to go on a journey to find out, what is this all about? Who am I? Who am I? Who is the guy who is playing all these different roles in life? So on the wider scale, that's on a personal level. But when you look at that on the wider scale, I think that's what's happening. That's what you've just explained.
Yeah.
I mean, Christopher, fascinating. We can just go on talking about this stuff, but what brought you into this journey of where you're at in life? What was, where did you come from, and how did you evolve past the like that kind of external validation? And because we all kind of grow up with a certain amount of conditioning, I'm sure, as you've spoke to earlier. Yeah. So
I think that I don't think, my view is that there's not a point where suddenly we are awakened or we are enlightened or anything like that. I think it's an ongoing work for me and for everyone. I think there's always more. So where did it begin? It began, as far as I remember, 13.8 billion years ago, right? The singularity, when something less than an atom sparked out into, sort of expanded out into this universe. You may think I'm joking, but every single movement of force, the electromagnetic force, the weak and strong nuclear forces, everything that has happened to this point has to have happened to get to this point now. And nothing can happen except the thing that's happening. right? Because it requires all the other things that have happened to happen exactly as they have done, including the formation of the sun, in the formation of the earth, and the spinning of the planet for 4,500 billion years. All that stuff had to happen from reptiles all the way through to get to this point in this conversation and everything else that's happening in the world and the universe right now, right? So this is the only thing that can happen. Nothing else could happen but this. So the answer is, that's the answer really.
That's
so
the answer,
I can't claim there's not an I that did something that enabled something to happen.
No, but I'm sure in this version of you travelling through this life, you know, through this energy, however you've been created, you know, you've got a level of consciousness, and in that consciousness there's a level of choice. So what I'm asking is, you know, when in your personal experience of this life, did you realise that, you know, maybe stuff wasn't working and you started making different choices?
Yeah, I'm going to go on off a little bit of a tangent. I'm not a great believer in free will.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's, again, an illusion, largely. I would say there's a guy called Robert Sapolsky, who's written a book called Determined, Life Without Free Will. He's a brilliant, absolutely brilliant biologist, and he's looking at the biological base of consciousness and the biological base of free will, and destroys all the stories that have ever been created around it really successfully. So he's brilliant, worth reading it. I don't think he's completely right, because I think there's one, and anyway, I'd have to have this discussion with him, but I think there's, Robert, if you're listening, you know, I think there's one way out of that, but mostly we're talking about all these biological algorithms and the cultural conditioning and everything on top of that, and the brain as a predicting device. Mostly what happens when people think they're making a choice is just all that activity appearing as choice, and it's not really choice. All right? So I think that's the first thing. Having said that, there are these moments where and for me, I think the moment is not knowing. I think coming to a place where things are broken, or coming to a place where things aren't working, or coming to a place where there's a not knowingness, for me is one of the most informationally rich places. That place of, I don't really know what I'm doing. I don't know where I'm going, you know, because I'm not in that kind of motivational, goal-oriented focus then. Something else is happening. There's an opening that happens where I go, wow, got no idea. Yeah? Yeah. And for me, it's the occurrence of those no ideas. And I've just been through an injury, as you know, and I remember having a back injury decades ago where I had a bilateral spinal prolapse and I couldn't walk. And for me, that was one of the most transformational moments, because it put me into a place of where everything I'd been doing before no longer worked, because I couldn't walk.
Yeah.
So I was lying on the floor trying to sort my back out, and I started to do some breathing stuff and some moving stuff, and gradually it started to feel better. And then I started to change my diet and look at what I was eating, and lots of things kind of falling into place in terms of understanding how can I help myself get better. And within about 6 months, I was up and it was fine. But that changed. That was an instrumental moment. And if I look at the kind of times in my life which are the most powerful, I think it's the times when actually I don't know, where there's a not knowing, and those, I think they're brilliant.
I think, I mean, and I that's where I try to live in life now. Yeah. Just in the security of not knowing what's going to happen next.
Yeah. Well, do we know? Do we actually know?
No, we don't. But there's that, once again, going back to that illusion of creating that illusion of security, which is, once again, I think, part of our species, you know, has taken us where we've gone, because we want to be in control and we want to have that illusion that we're going to be safe and we're going to be secure. Yes. And you know, I suppose it's a natural part of life. But, you know, when you look at it, when you take an accident or something like that, and all of a sudden, you know, all of your plans, all of the way that you've lived your life, all of your expectations and your goals and your direction, bang, is just changed in an instant.
That's right, yeah.
Then, you know, that shatters that illusion of, like, you know, we have got any control over life. Yeah. So, I mean, I've kind of taken that principle and tried to make that, you know, how I live. So, you know, I'm really happy that I walk out the door. I don't know who I'm going to see. I don't know who I'm going to talk to. You know, obviously, I've done certain things and created a certain amount of practicalities in life that are going to give me, you know, a means to eat and stuff like that. But, you know, the rest of it is like, anything can change it in an instant. And I truly do this. So, I kind of get up in the morning and I surrender whatever my perception of will is. I surrender that into, just like I'm open to whatever flows here today.
Yeah.
And I find it a fantastic way to live.
And if we look into different philosophies for a moment, there's a Shakta philosophy from India, which says that it describes will as Icha Shakti. So it's not even us. The will is something that is, the force of the universe moving through us. So it's just what's happening again. It's not that it's my will, although we can think of it like that. It isn't actually that. It's just what's happening, which presents itself to us, and the way we hang on to it is mine. But it's it's just what's happening.
Yeah, I mean, these are really deep philosophies that. I mean, I haven't studied any of that stuff, but I kind of, I tune into it. I've come from a completely different route, but, and I think it's like you were saying, all of this stuff runs really, really deep, and these practices go back a long, long time. And, and I think, I understand this language. Hopefully everyone's understanding this language, but it's hard to get your head around, isn't it, when you're...
I think
there.
Yes, it is, and I think when people are caught up in, the stress of daily life, like 73% of people we're talking about there, it's really, really difficult to get to find a way out of that. It's a huge problem because again, then people are living from that place, and it's if we could make changes here that actually benefit people, we'd be shifting the culture to enable people to live with a better quality of life very rapidly, and to enable children to grow up without adversity with a better quality of life. We know, children growing up in childhood adversity, it changes the way the brain grows. You don't get myelination. That's the kind of fatty sheaths around the fast traffic nerves don't lay down as well. So bits of the brains can't talk to each other properly. So you've got kids growing up in such adversity that the emotional part of the brain can't talk to the prefrontal cortex. And this bit only comes on when you're 27 anyway. It only matures when you're 27. That's the bit that does the free will choice bit. So if it's not joined up to the rest of it properly, you've got nothing. It's really difficult. You're going to be in reactive mode with everything you do. And we know that about over 90% of the prison population are people that grew up in childhood adversity because their brain's not wired up in the most optimal way. So if we could shift and change things as a culture and enable all our children to grow up well, and enable people to live with quality of life, we'd be doing something really positive on this planet. And that's a big ask, I know that. It's a big ask.
It's a massive ask, because... I'm thinking of my own journey. I mean, I qualify myself as one of those kids who grew up in childhood adversity and then went through, my own adversity, addiction and all that kind of stuff. But, there's an out even for that. There's an out somewhere. There's a catalyst somewhere that gives us an opportunity, whether it's to make a conscious choice or not, or whatever it is, there's possibility for change, but to try and avoid that in the first place would be brilliant, And
again, I mean, for me, one of the, talk about catalysts, for me the catalysts have been particular people as well. So I have to give, whilst they themselves are also a manifestation of the universe and recognizing all of that. I mean, there was one teacher who was a woman in my life who was fundamentally transformational and facilitated my journey so well. Like, she took me under her wing and insisted on teaching me. She told me that she had to train me as a teacher and this kind of thing. And I said, I don't want to do that. I'm not doing that. But I worked with her for 12 years. And she was an amazing human being. And I think, so for me, that there's a relational shift in that as well, where it's somebody says something or does something that's important, that opens things up, and suddenly you get, again, one of those ahas that goes, oh, I hadn't seen it that way. And I think those important people in life are profoundly beautiful. And I've been blessed. I don't know if everybody has those, but I've been blessed by a number of those people coming into my life and pointing things out that I just would probably not have seen otherwise. And, you talk about childhood adversity. I think, my own journey as well was populated with, different to yours probably, but, a different version of that and different struggles. But I look back on it sometimes and I think without those influences, I could have easily ended up in a rehab or in prison.
Yeah.
You know, those are the two outcomes that were most likely, probably. Yeah.
Yeah, based on
Probably rehab, but you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, based on I suppose just based on numbers really.
Yeah, yeah.
So there's not, I mean, out of the people that I know, you know, many of them are not even alive on this planet anymore.
Yeah, same.
You know?
Yeah, same, yeah.
So that just tells me a lot to start with, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
Looking at, you know, how many people have actually used that experience to, I mean, yeah, as I'm saying this, I'm realising I don't know all of these people's individual lives, but, you know, it's just, I think it's not the norm, is it? To transform from that and you know, that woman who started, you know, mentoring you into training or teaching, you know, provided an opportunity which you met. You know, you kind of had to meet that, didn't you? Cause, I mean, you've been practicing and for years and years, haven't you? I mean,
decades
40
now.
years, 50 years?
Yeah, decades, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's 50 years.
50 years. So
50 years of daily practice of some kind or another. You know, talking martial arts and breathwork and meditation and one thing or another. But it changes how your brain works. You know, you've got to be careful with that kind of stuff. It's dangerous.
Yeah, I think it's it must change. It does change. I mean, my brain's changed. You know, the way I used to think and the way, you know, the way I used to. Yeah, I mean, just the way I used to look at life was just so narrow compared to how it is now. Yeah. So yeah, my brain has obviously, you know, has changed. I don't know if it's changed physically, but the way it operates has changed massively.
I think the way it operates changes. I think it changes physically as well. We know, again from science, we know that somebody who lives in a high adrenalized state, that's lots of fear, lots of stress, that kind of thing. The amygdala, which is kind of the fear watchdog of the brain, actually grows in size. And after a while, the hippocampus, which memorizes emotionally significant events, also grows, but then it starts to shrink. It doesn't work for other memories. And you know, and bits of the prefrontal cortex shrink because you just don't need them. You know, so and you can grow bits of the prefrontal cortex by doing things like an awareness of breathing practice. So there are ways we can, you know, actually work with the kind of neuroplastic functions of the brain, the way the brain changes and grows all the time, and we can work optimally with that. And some of the practices actually do that, and they do that well. And other ones, you know, at other times in life, if we're not doing that, then the brain is actually physically changing, and you know, it gets, with those physical changes to the brain, we get a lot of complications as well. We get physical changes, you know, increased rates of cardiovascular disorder and cancer and diabetes and all sorts of other things as well, which are all related to stress levels.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I mean, thinking, just as you were saying that, I was thinking, you know, obviously, you know, just the fact how we start out at like a tiny little embryo and grow into these versions of ourselves is just incredible, isn't it? I think, you know, I'm fascinated by like the whole human experience, really. Yeah. And I mean, without being a biologist, I mean, you don't need to be, but just to know that, you know, we're constantly, our cells are dying and regenerating, and all of this stuff is happening. A part of this experience of life that we're having, and it's it's really incredible to when you zoom out enough to, like, you know, even just take that in and then look at the plant and think, well, the plant's doing the same sort of thing, you know, it's having a different experience, but, you know, something's going on there, which is of great value to us as a species, obviously. And
if you go back far enough in time, you know, the ancestor of this and our ancestor are the same.
Right.
Yeah. It's a thing called the last universal common ancestor. And it's a particular kind of cell with a mitochondria in it. But that's the ancestor of all plants, all fungi, and all animals. So, you know, we're related. Yeah.
Everything's related.
Everything's related.
As I'm sure you say. So what are you, because we was just talking, you was telling us a fascinating story about being caught in a fire in Portugal on a retreat. And I think that's, and you were saying it's kind of changed your view on what you want, how you want to show up in life and what you want to do, possibly work-wise or generally.
I think, where do I begin with that? I think the fire itself was beautiful and powerful. It's like it was alive. And I felt like I could feel the plants and the animals in their struggles and in them dying. I felt like my body was empathizing with nature in that way.
Mm.
And at the same time, I wasn't scared of dying. I felt really alive in it. And yet at the same time, I don't know, it's difficult to describe, but I just felt whatever I'm doing now is over. It was like it's being burnt to ashes, and this is really good. This is really good. Because out of that, something else will come, and I don't need to know what that is. I don't need to know.
Mm.
And it doesn't matter if it's working in a cafe, serving coffee, or driving an Amazon truck, or it doesn't really matter, because whatever it is, it'll be the right thing.
Mm.
But it was a change. It was one of those change points, I was talking about.
Yeah.
This is a change point, and I feel it in my body, and it's been manifesting since then, and I'm not sure what's emerging, and I've got no idea, and I don't really care.
What a beautiful place to be in life.
Because it'll be what it'll be.
Yeah.
And I'm every breath I take is one breath closer to death.
For sure, for all of us.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I didn't die in the fire, but I'm good. This body's good. This nervous system experience of being a separate thing is going to expire. It's got an expiry date on it. I just don't know when it is. And whilst I'd like to hang out for a while and enjoy the scenery for a bit and that kind of thing, and look after my kids and do the things that I feel are responsible things to do. Other than that, it doesn't really matter. So and again, I understand that human beings love safety and we like to feel safe, but I think when we prioritize safety over reality, it gets complicated.
Yeah. We try. Well, it's just an element of control, isn't it? Just trying to hedge our bets and what you've just described there is just that what I was describing, just being in that place where you can just be and receive whatever's coming and just not be attached to it or attached to the results of it I think it's a rare place to be in life, and most people maybe would see those sort of characters as someone just living out in the jungle or just being completely away from it all, but we can live like that in a daily life and experience the functionality of how we live and interact with our families and children, but to have that it's just like a very, very unusual experience of life. I think a great way to live.
Yeah, I think I think of it as rewilding almost.
Rewilding, yeah.
Yeah, I think we're so domesticated and so hooked onto safety and we're domestic. We're the only species that domesticates itself. We've domesticated lots of other species, sheep. And we know that with the domestication of sheep, the brain size of the sheep is shrinking and shrinking because they don't have to worry about predators. They don't have to look for food. They get medicated. At the right time, they get slaughtered and turned into, lamb curry or whatever happens to them. I've got no idea. Don't tend to eat them. But, we've domesticated all this species and we're domesticating ourselves. And it's a funny process we're going through. And I think there's a place for rewilding where and rewilding doesn't mean being unkind. Because I think wild is kind. I think there's a wildness that is super kind because it really understands the vulnerabilities of what it is to be alive, because it's facing into death. I think it's when we try and avoid death and we try and focus on our own little bit of safety that we end up being unkind, because we're actually locked into the narrative and the predictive mechanisms of taking care of this little bit and not really engaging with the greater possibilities of life.
Yeah. I mean, that makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah, it's my current view. It'll probably change.
Yeah, and that's great. I mean, we're not tied to a particular view. I mean, if it changes, it changes, and that's.
We have absolutely no obligation to our previous beliefs to
no, exactly.
It's just like fine. It's fine.
I mean, that was a massive freeing thing to me. That when I learned that I don't have to be attached to how I thought yesterday or what my ideas were yesterday, and I think that's just such a great tool to go forward with in just moving forward.
Isn't it?
in life. Yeah, just realising that. Yeah, just because I said that and I believed it yesterday.
Yeah.
It could change today. You know, it could change later.
Yeah.
It's,
If you look at the principles of rebirth in Tibetan Buddhism, they understand rebirth not just between lives, but between moments of thought. Because the principle in there is that the brain is constantly doing the selfing thing, the thing the I, me, mine thing. It's constantly making up that story. So our brains are busy making up the me story the whole time because it keeps us feeling safe and it gives us a sense of continuity in relationship and in the world. So it's a necessary function, but it's not true, right? So the principle is if we can go into that and kind of slow it down, do a bit of time distortion in there and slow it all down so we see the brain going, I'm making up a story of me in relationship to this person right now. Ah, that was very smart. Oh, and now I'm doing it there, and now I'm doing that. And we slow it down a bit more, and we get the space between those moments. And in the space between those moments, there's just empty awareness, open awareness, nothing. Open awareness. Oh. And then there's a little bit of going, oh, I'm making up a story about this now in relationship to my bank account. Oh, and then there's open awareness, open awareness, open awareness. And when we can get into those open awareness spaces and see the selfing delusion for what it is, what we find is what we are really is open awareness. And in that moment, then there's a possibility of rebirth. We can make up anything. It's freedom.
Yeah. Yeah, I've kind of tended to do that, to over a long period of time just become aware of that process and aware of the faults and be able to catch the faults and recognise them, that that they're just insanity really. They're quite often insane. Yeah. Just because they're repetitiveness and they don't really serve me, but they're there, and I just catch them today.
If we understand the mind, really understand it, because what the mind does, I define what I mean. 6 external sense fields: seeing, hearing, tasting, smelling, touching, and electromagnetism. Right. And then the internal sense fields of proprioception and interoception and the gut brain, the enteric nervous system, which is really ancient. This bit's 500 million years old, that gut brain, kind of got to listen to that bit. And the heart. And then the sense-making mechanisms of the cortex, which is trying to make sense of all that information, because this is just the bit that makes sense out of it all. And it makes sense by taking all the information, filtering it through the past, like I said, and then weaving a story around it. It weaves a story of me out of all of that. And if you look at how we tell stories to each other, I could tell you a story of, I was over in Southend this morning and I got the train and I sent you a message, could you pick me up from, all our stories, that's how we communicate. And there's nothing wrong with stories. But stories are great, right? But we have to see through them again for what they are. They're the way that our brain is translating that information to create a continuity moment where we can relate to other people. And in as much as we see that for what it is, like I said, there's nothing wrong with it, but then we're free within it. We're not stuck in that story. In other words, we're confined in the story, or confined in the belief. We're kind of in a prison of our own mental making. And not only that, but the brain then pushes all that stuff into the future. It's busy making meanings as well, because it joins some of those dots together to create a meaning. Oh, this means this means this means the other. And then we push it into the future and apprehend what the future might hold. What would happen if, what would happen if, what would happen if, what would happen if. And so all this kind of mechanism in terms of the evolutionary sense is a problem-solving kit. It's a fantastic, creative, artistic, beautiful problem-solving kit with 1,000 trillion synapses. Wonderful. And in our modern world, we're so addicted to it and so addicted to the thought process and the problem-solving that life itself is a problem now. So we always have to be thinking, solving the problem of life. And there isn't a moment where we can just stop it and switch it off because, well, there isn't a problem right now. My belly's full, got some clothes on my back, sun is shining, what a gorgeous day. There's not a problem right now.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it's a great way to describe it. And yeah, as you was sharing that, I was kind of relating to I mean, obviously it's the mental side of that, but then we've got all of these past experiences of feelings, of wounds, all of this stuff. And as you was sharing that, I kind of was visualising my own version of that recently, and I think I might have even shared it before when it happened on a podcast. But my mother left when I was 8 years old, and I had an abandonment wound, which kind of went through life with me, and much, I'd done whatever I could when I was a kid to get rid of it and suppressed it and just didn't even know it was there. I didn't know it was there until later on in life. And it was a relationship that ended a couple of years ago, and I was out running locally. I was out just jogging, and as I was running, I run past somewhere we'd stopped and had a coffee, me and this woman. And then I caught a little story about, maybe her friend might have been sitting there and would say that I see Stephen running past. And it come like that, and I caught it straight away.
Yeah.
I thought, that's nuts, I thought, that's mad. And I thought, what is that story? Where did that come from? And I kind of felt down into it, and then I felt a bit of loss, probably around the heart area. I felt like, there's a bit of loss there.
Nice.
The loss of this relationship. And then I felt, okay, that's fair enough. But, I've kind of had this story throughout my life. And then I felt down further. And then, I felt into this childhood abandonment wound. And I was down in there. And I'm still running, I'm running. This. So as I'm running down there, and then I saw what it was. And there was a child there, who was just going, help me, see me, someone fucking see me. And this whole thing that this story where it generated, I kind of traced it back down. Just as I was jogging, I just thought, wow. Wow, that was like, coming from 8 years old or something. And I'm like,
One of my earliest memories when I was 4, right, is my mum telling me off because I'd been out in the yard doing something she didn't want me to do. And she came in, she was towering over me and she was telling me off. And I turned around and shouted at her. And I said to her, well, you never wanted me anyway. And that was a 4.
Right.
Because I had some memory from being in the womb. Now, it's not possible. That's complete nonsense, isn't it? Complete nonsense. Well, my body remembered enough. Because my mum my mum was fantastic in lots of ways, but we never really bonded because when I was born, I was in a plastic box for a couple of weeks.
Right.
So, and, there was no breastfeeding or any of that kind of stuff that gives you the bonding. So, I worked it out with my mum in the end. We spent 16 years kind of working it out and got there before she died. And it was really good to do that work with her, to recognise that the connection that we could have had in that early attachment experience wasn't possible because of the context. And that divorced both of us from that relationship in a meaningful way. And we've been battling each other in that zone. But, she was a poor woman. She was a working class woman. She wasn't nourished properly. My father was poor. They had to pick up coal off the railway line to light the fire in the winter because it was so cold. All that kind of nonsense going on. Lack of food, 1950s, end of rationing. And on top of that, my older brother was ill and sick in hospital. He was having a kidney taken out. So and paediatric care in those days, adults weren't allowed to be around. Toys were taken away from the kids. It wasn't kind. And then on top of that, her mum died as well up in North Yorkshire, and she couldn't go home because she didn't have money to go get a ticket for the funeral. Couldn't get on the train. So there's a lot going on for her. So it's really difficult. But of course, my experience being in that womb then was not being wanted.
Right.
Which wasn't what she wanted. It wasn't her intention. She was just struggling.
Yeah.
And how the hell do I remember that anyway? Of course, it's nonsense, isn't it? Yeah. But I felt it and I spoke it when I was 4. Yeah. And then...
So, that's obviously evidence that was there.
It was something, at least, So, but that abandonment stuff, when I was relating to your story, I was feeling, again, what you were saying, and I hear, and the fact that you went through that process of catching that and feeling that from that place of catching the story and dropping into the feeling and then going through time to the early onset of that feeling and where it started and catching all of that process, that, I've just got to say, respect, bro. That is the work.
Yeah.
That is amazing. And that is the work, isn't it? Of going back in and tracking those things. And again, so many people live from the place of their stories. They're making stories about other people and act as if those stories are true. And not being able to see that it's a story their brain's conjured up out of wounds or about past experiences. It's just a story. Yeah. And if we could just catch it and say, hey, brain, that's an amazing story you just created about Stephen. Is it even true? Do I know enough about this person to make up a story? Well, no, I don't really.
Yeah.
It's just phenomenal.
It was just so kind of enlightening that.
Yeah.
And obviously it was a coping mechanism. It was just a mechanism that I made up to cope with that situation that I couldn't cope with.
That's what we do.
Yeah.
That's what we human beings do. But if we can't see that we're doing that, and if we can't see we're operating from that, we're walking blindly into the world.
Yeah.
It's a tough place to be.
It is, yeah. I mean, it's very, yeah. I mean, it's very powerful to share this sort of stuff, and your, you know, that experience you just shared around 4 years old, having that recollection of being, you know, being in there in that womb and being disconnected and coming out into the world feeling that.
Yeah.
You know, it's quite powerful, isn't it?
It is. And, you know, and the woman I was talking about was my teacher. And one of the roles she occupied was actually being a second mother in some way. You know, she, like I said, she took me under her wing. But what she did for me was then give me an experience of attachment and bonding and reconnection in a way that I hadn't had with my own mother.
Mm.
That was part of what was going on, as well as teaching me a whole load of skills and other stuff. But that was part of what was happening. You know? Yeah, so we meet these people who see something in us. Maybe they see our potential. There's a woman called, what's her name? Alice Miller, who wrote a book called The Drama of the Gifted Child, and another one as well. And she was looking at from creativity to destructiveness, I think it's called. I can't remember now. But what she was looking at is people who've been through significant childhood adversity, and whether that adversity comes out as creativity or destructiveness. So she was looking at people like Salvador Dali and Hitler and Stalin. And as Hitler and Stalin were badly treated and didn't have somebody in their life who saw them, who met them and saw their potential and took them under their wing, you know. So what they do is they reap their version of love, which is pain, suffering, warfare, onto the planet. And somebody like Salvador Dali was able to take that because he had somebody who could mentor him and take him under his wing. There was enough there for him to feel that connection and be seen in that way. So then he could turn it into creativity, into artwork, or into something else.
Yeah.
And so many creatives have had some kind of experience like that, and they're turning that into work in the world. And the big difference there is that relational connection.
Yeah. And most people are just unaware of all of this stuff, and like I was, and many other people. But
that was a beautiful story, by the way, bro.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a powerful story, and it was just like, really moved by that. But as you say, I mean, I'd been doing that work for a long time, and you know, not necessarily that particular, like, you know, I mean, there's a lot of kind of inner child work that I hear about and I heard about, and you know, I never went down any of that sort of route. You know, it's just. It was there in me, and I just had to find it. I just had to find that connection by moving the stuff out of the way that was blocking it, really. You know, taking all the stuff that I'd put on top of it to filter it and to try and make it okay. You know, by removing all of that. Yeah. And it's powerful, and I mean going to the breathwork, because we've hardly spoke about the breathwork, but you know, I've had some fascinating experiences in breathwork, and one of the first, actually it was the first experience of breathwork, was with you in the yoga factory in Southend, and we'd done, the first time I'd done a deep dive, holotropic, is it, breathwork? The first time I'd done that, I was just, had a really intense experience of feeling the vibration within me, feeling the energy, and you've probably got an explanation for what was going on, but I could like feel the energy. And anyway, and once we was down regulated and we was finishing that, I don't know if you remember, but we was finishing that, and we was just about to kind of get up, and the session had finished, so it was all down regulated. Just as I rolled over, you said, like, you know, if everyone kind of roll over onto one side before sitting up. And just as I rolled over, I had that whoosh, like a whoosh. I was transported back into the womb, and just felt that just as I was laying there in a kind of fetal position. And felt I was connected. You know, I'd like to get your take on it, but I felt I was connected to something just so beautiful, something so incredible and loving. And it wasn't. I don't think it was the umbilical connection. I don't think, I could be wrong, but I don't think it was that. And there's stuff that's happened recently that kind of gives me a different view on that. But I was connected to, I think, you know, whatever it was before I came here. That's the only way I can describe it. And then I felt like another rush.
The source.
The source, exactly. Yeah.
I think the source is a good enough word if you understand the source as the continuity as well. So it's not just was then, but is also now. Yeah. Yeah, the always ever present source, yes. The source, yeah. So, and then I felt like a separation from that source. Yeah.
and I realised that I came into this life that was like the coming away from it. And I remember, and I shared it in the circle after. I said I was just filled with just sorrow, just a deep sorrow.
I remember.
And it was really profound, you know. And it was kind of like my first recollection of this journey in this life. I was filled with sorrow, and there's another part to that which I've recently discovered, but. You know, I find that fascinating. So, you know, your story about recalling being in the womb and bringing that with you, and 4 years old, you know, being able to verbalise that.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, I think it's this stuff that is difficult to explain is happening, and you know, I think where my awareness has widened as you described earlier. I think all of a sudden all these other things are accessible that probably we've all got access to at some point.
I'm sure we have.
Yeah, but it's fascinating.
Yeah, I can't see that we don't have, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But really powerful. So that was my first experience of breathwork, and it was just.
So if that source energy or that source continuity, if you know, I'm not a fan of the word God. I don't like it because it's loaded with a load of kind of medieval preconceptions and stuff like that. But that, if you know that the field, the source, whatever that is, that's kind of what we all are.
Yeah.
Really, if you see it that way, I mean that's what you experienced, from what I understand of what you're saying. And if we all are that, then that and if we could all just remember that and live treating each other as if we were that, you know, and you know, there's a greeting in northern India which is Namo Narayan, where you meet somebody on the path, and which simply means I greet that part of the divine in you. I greet the divine within you. Yeah. So it's you know, other cultures and you know, God morning, God be with you, you know, good morning, those kind of things, or you know, God be with you actually is goodbye, isn't it? You know, but those kind of ways of understanding, if we could build something of the rapture, something of the bliss of that back into our daily, something of the wonder and the miracle of that back into daily life, and understand each other as that, and you know, I think it would be a step forward to some degree.
Yeah, I really identify with your reluctance to, you know, use that term God, and why. For me, I you know, when I'm trying to describe this stuff, and we was talking about the source, and it's a great way to put it because it just leaves it completely open, doesn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
But when you start, and quite often, you know, if I'm talking to other groups or other people, and I'm trying to explain stuff, and I really try to avoid using the term God, because everyone just brings their own connotations of what that is, and
preconceptions,
preconceptions, exactly, and it's. Yeah, and that's great. I mean, everyone's entitled to their own beliefs, but it kind of it loads, you know, what people are receiving by their perception of what you're talking about. So when we're getting down to that sort of level of stuff, it's good not to have labels and not to have, you know, preconceptions. And
I mean, you know, in the Buddhist world, they have a word to describe something, which they use the word shunyata, which is translated really badly into English as emptiness. So everybody then looks at that word, and again with the preconceptions of what that word means, they then translate that as empty, void, right? And you know, I hear so many even adept yoga philosophers and you know, people from different religions thinking that's what they mean, and they don't. What empty means is that it is empty of empty. Now check that out. Get a sense of what do you mean empty of empty? Well, it's empty of any concept. It's empty of anything your brain can do in terms of thinking about it, conceiving of it, labeling it, or any of that kind of stuff. That is not good enough. So it's almost like Taoism, where it says that the way that can be named is not the way. Yeah. So if you can define it with a word or a label in some way, then you kind of miss the point. Yeah. So it's this shunyata. It's empty of concept, inconceivable. So inconceivable, I think, is the closest term we can come to something like that. It's not even conceivable. Your wonderful brain with its 1,000 trillion synapses, absolutely beautiful, fantastic. Sorry, cannot compute it.
And it makes it difficult, doesn't it, to understand those experiences we was just talking about. But you know, it's really interesting that you've used the word void there, because for me, and I think, you know, my observation of how we live as a species, we're trying to fill a void.
Yeah.
We're trying to fill a void.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting that that terminology has come from there.
Yeah.
Because we try to, you know, fill it with external things, with, you know, relationships, with anything, you know,
Food,
anything and everything.
Food, fast cars, trainers, you name it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, media, you know, whatever it is. And I think, you know, it's really nice that my kind of understanding has been of my journey, and you may relate to this, has been about, you know, rediscovering this deep connection within me that provides everything that I need, and it has always been there, and it was probably there at source. And I think when I came into this world, maybe, you know, there was some sort of separation there, and this experience that I'm having separated that in some way. And then, you know, the rest of my life has been through different journeys of experience and adversity and kind of reconnection. Rewilding has been part of that. Of just trying to really just connect again to that. And when I get connected to that, which I am, it kind of just connects me to everything else as well.
Yeah, it's funny that, isn't it?
Yes, it is funny, isn't it?
Well, it's beautiful. I mean, I think that's what it's about. Really, is finding that internal aspect of whatever that is, the inconceivable, you know, and finding that inside, and then emanating that into the world in a good way. And I think that's where peace and joy and, you know, peace of mind, joy, all those things come from. I don't think it comes from anywhere else. It's not, you're not going to create it exogenously. That's from the outside.
Yeah.
You know, you're not going to take a substance and snort it up your nose or something like that and suddenly find peace of mind. That's not going to work.
You'll find an escape or a kind of maybe what may seem like some sort of experience that gives you that, but ultimately it's completely different. And I had it actually on the retreat that I was on. Was it last weekend? Recently. You was there, obviously, on the Sunday, and I had it. We was outside in the garden, and I think James and they was just talking, but as they was talking, I was just in contact with everything. You know, I could see a tiny little fly flying in the distance, and the wind, and, you know, my awareness was really heightened, and it was just like, wow, I was full up connected with that kind of source, I suppose.
I think that quality of awareness, that level of awareness, is that expansive possibility of awareness is natural. And I think when we find that and begin to experience that more and more, you know, it changes things. It just changes everything. It's a whole different game all of a sudden. You know, whatever game we thought we were playing, that no longer really matters. You know, whatever we think we're becoming, all of a sudden is kind of it's not that critical. You know, something else is happening then. It's a different game. And it's beautiful, and again, I don't think it stops. And I think the work of that kind of level of awareness is then responsibility, is service.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, being responsible in service, and I think that's. I sometimes say the work of freedom is service. You know, understanding how to be of service in the world in a good way to enable some kind of positivity, or not that anything's negative. Positivity is the wrong word. Can you think of a word? What would describe it?
Well, just to be of value and to be of
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. Just to be of value, to value what we're doing and our experience of life, and and share that and pass it on.
And help people.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think, you know, just to as part of what I was kind of thinking about doing is just passing this down, and I'm looking now, you know, I look at like the solution starts here in the present, because it can't start anywhere else. As you said, you know, we're here as a result of everything that's happened, but looking at like maybe instead of looking at these short-term solutions that our species is kind of tied itself to,
Yeah.
you know, we need to start looking at the generations that are coming.
Yeah. Yes.
And start teaching them and start, you know, passing our stuff on to them.
Yes.
But we can only do that with our own awareness, really. So
Yeah.
I think it's valuable that, you know, once we get that awareness, or once we start recognising that, then we start putting that energy forward and, you know, going into schools or you know, teaching a level where people are not so corrupted in their lives at that point, you know, and maybe we can offer them just a different experience.
Like we were talking about, I mean, the next generation, the children and the children's children are what it's about. If we're not supporting the development and the growth of our children and our children's children in a positive, powerful way, to allow them to emerge in who they need to be, not who we think they should be. And there's a lot of stuff around is who we think they should be rather than who they are and who they're becoming of themselves, in and of themselves. If we're not doing that, what are we doing? That's the future. I was saying, you know, I think schools we should have highly trained, well-resourced places for young people to learn and grow. Yeah. Not just education factories where there's insufficient resource and overstressed out teachers because we can't be bothered to fund it. You know, it's crazy what we're doing.
It is, and it's for all short-term gains. We're just like ticking boxes there mainly. Yeah. And I mean that needs to be addressed. A lot of other stuff needs to be addressed, but I think our system needs to be addressed, doesn't it?
It does,
really?
yeah.
You know, because it's the system that creates all these nuances of restriction and restriction on our human capacity.
That is a big conversation, an important conversation to rethink and to rework everything, because what we've got isn't working. If we've got 73% of the population living in stress, if we've got children growing up in a dysfunctional, difficult, complicated way, it's not working. It's not working. You know, it may be working for some people. And the question then is to ask, well, who is it working for? And of course, then we point to higher echelons of bankers, whoever are making the dollar on the top. But we've got to make it work for everybody. Yeah. And if it's not doing that, it's not going to work for anybody eventually, because it's short-term thinking. Yeah. Super short-term thinking.
And our whole structures are tied to that, really. And I think, you know, when you start to look, you know, you don't have to look far to who's benefiting from this. And
follow the dollar.
Yeah. And also it's, these systems seem to be designed to keep us where we are. Yeah. You know, just to keep us looking for the next best thing, or, you know, whatever it is, the next external validation of how we can feel that we're winning in this game, you know. Yeah. And it's like smoke and mirrors, isn't it, really?
Yeah. Smoke and mirrors of domestication.
Yeah, I like that, yeah. But it's great that, you know, there's people like you in this world, and people that have dedicated their time and their energy and their work to really, you know, trying to pass something different on, trying to give people a different experience. And I think it's just so valuable that, you know, the breath work and the rest of it is just, you know, I mean, they're accessible things that people can actually start to recalibrate and rewild with on very basic, you know, small, you know, you don't need to, like, you know, go out and spend thousands of pounds, or, you know, you don't need like the equivalent of a new car or a new house or a new anything. You know, you can just start very simply.
Breath skills, mind skills, body skills, relational skills. You know, you don't need money's not the thing that's going to give you that. It's time. You need time, and you need some discipline.
Yeah, and consistency, which is what you was talking about earlier on.
Consistency, yes. Because if you're working with biological algorithms, you need consistency. If you're going to change, you know, the way the brains operate, if it's running on particular patterns, to interrupt and change those patterns, consistency and regularity is critical, which is what discipline is, really. That's all it is. Yeah. But you have to have those. You have to put that in place. Yeah. You can learn how to do that. It's not difficult to learn that.
No, it's very achievable and very accessible, and I mean, it'd be interesting. If I kind of want to do some more work in making these things accessible to people from my perspective, and you know,
look forward to that.
To collaborate with other people that have also got that same level of wanting to serve and to be of service, because that is, I think that's, I mean, I say it probably every podcast, but I think it comes to a point in life where it stops being about, you know, what can I get, and it becomes what can I give, and And that's like a pivotal change, isn't it?
Brilliant. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Christopher, it's been absolutely amazing talking to you.
Thank you.
Where can people follow, what you're doing or access your work or your courses?
Yeah, if you want to find out what I'm doing, you can go to christophergladwell.com. It's all there.
Okay.
You can look me up on Instagram, but the website is a good place to begin, christophergladwell.com.
Yeah.
So anything I'm doing, if that changes, then it means that I'm changing what I'm doing.
Yeah, and it's all evolving. And
Yeah, it's all evolving, changing.
So,
And
yeah.
so it needs to be.
Brilliant.
So it's good. Yeah.
Brilliant stuff.
Change is the thing.
Change is the only constant.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the only constant. But it's been great to finally get to, sit down again after that other wild conversation.
That was a wild conversation. We should do a wild conversation again, but that was good. Yeah.
But this has been wild in its own way, but I've really enjoyed it. And
likewise.
Yeah, I really enjoy your presence and your company. And
Yeah, thank you.
Lots of love, Christopher.
Been great to see you again. Thank you.
Take care. Cheers.
Bye-bye.